On April 15 in Munich, something unbelievable happened. Something that stopped the football world completely in its tracks. Something that had fans across the globe jumping out of their seats and grabbing their phones to check if what they just witnessed was actually real. Kylian Mbappé did something that shocked the entire football world. Something not even Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo had ever done before in the entire history of the Champions League. And suddenly, one of Ronaldo's most legendary records started to look vulnerable, because that night at the Allianz Arena, Real Madrid were already collapsing from the inside out. La Liga was slipping away, with Barcelona holding a commanding 9-point lead at the top of the table. The Copa del Rey was already gone after a humiliating exit against second division Albacete in the round of 16. The coaching staff had already been changed mid-season, with Xabi Alonso replaced by Antóvaro Arbeloa, and Bayern Munich were about to end Madrid's final remaining dream of the season. Their Champions League campaign, everything was falling apart around them. The dressing room was tense, the fans were frustrated, the media was already writing the obituary of Real Madrid's season. But through all of that chaos and pressure and noise, there was one man who refused to accept the narrative. One man who showed up anyway. One man who walked into that stadium with a wound on his face, a bandage across his eyebrow, blood still visible, and an attitude that said the game is not over until I say it is over. Kylian Mbappé, who stepped onto the pitch that night at the Allianz Arena and scored his 15th Champions League goal of the season. A moment so powerful and so historic that it suddenly made the impossible look genuinely possible, because only one player in the entire history of the Champions League had ever scored more goals in a single campaign. Cristiano Ronaldo with 17 goals in the 2013 to 2014 season, a record that football analysts and former players and coaches have been calling untouchable for over a decade. A record that people said belonged to a different era, a different level of dominance. Yet Mbappé was now standing just 2 goals away from it. 2 goals in one of the most dramatic Champions League nights in recent memory, and the world sat in absolute disbelief. But the real shock did not come from those 15 goals alone. The real shock came when the numbers revealed something even bigger and even more extraordinary. Something that made every football fan stop and rethink everything they thought they knew about the greatest players in this sport's history. Because Mbappé had scored 10 away goals in a single Champions League season, 10 goals on the road away from the Bernabeu in hostile stadiums across Europe, in matches where the crowd was against him and the pressure was at its absolute maximum. And this is something that neither Cristiano Ronaldo with his 140 Champions League goals accumulated over an entire legendary career at Manchester United, Real Madrid, and Juventus, nor Lionel Messi with his 129 Champions League goals built across his glorious years at Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain had ever achieved in the entire history of the competition. And when you stop and truly absorb that fact, when you sit with it for just a moment, it becomes one of the most staggering individual achievements in modern football. A 27-year-old Frenchman doing something in a single season that 2 of the greatest players the sport has ever produced could not do in their entire careers. And what makes this story even more powerful? What gives it a layer of emotion and drama that goes far beyond statistics and records and numbers on a page, is what happened just weeks before that night in Munich. Because Mbappé was facing heavy criticism, serious heavy criticism from Real Madrid fans and Spanish media, who were openly questioning whether he was truly good enough for the club, whether the move from Paris Saint-Germain to Real Madrid had been a mistake, whether the weight of expectation was simply too much for him to carry. And in the middle of all that noise and pressure, Mbappé stood up and gave a response that the football world will not forget quickly. He mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo himself by name. He said that at Real Madrid, everyone gets criticized, even legends like Ronaldo and Alfredo Di Stefano, 2 of the greatest players to ever wear the white shirt, and that the only way to truly answer your critics is not with words but on the pitch. And that night in Munich, under the brightest lights, with the highest stakes and the heaviest pressure, Mbappé walked onto that pitch and proved every single word of what he had said, because the numbers now tell an incredible and truly breathtaking story. Cristiano Ronaldo has 140 Champions League goals accumulated over a career spanning nearly 2 decades of elite football. Lionel Messi has 129 Champions League goals built over his extraordinary years in Europe, and Kylian Mbappé already has 70 Champions League goals at just 27 years old, which means he has already reached the halfway point of Ronaldo's all-time record before even entering what many consider to be the true peak years of a modern footballer's career. And while Ronaldo reached the 70-goal mark closer to the age of 30, Mbappé has done it 3 full years earlier, which means that if he stays fit, if he stays hungry, if he continues performing at even close to this level, the most untouchable record in Champions League history, the record that has stood for over a decade as a monument to Ronaldo's greatness, might actually be within Mbappe's reach in the next few years. And the broader picture of this season only makes this story more extraordinary, because across all competitions for club and country, Mbappé scored 40 goals in just 39 appearances. He led La Liga in scoring with 23 goals. He led the entire Champions League in scoring with 15 goals as the competition's top scorer. These are numbers that in any normal season would guarantee a player multiple major trophies, but Real Madrid's collective struggles meant that Mbappé could finish the season empty-handed, which is perhaps the strangest and most bittersweet dimension of this entire story. The best individual performer in European football this season may end up with nothing to show for it in terms of silverware, yet the records he has broken and the history he has written in the process will outlast any trophy. Former Real Madrid defender Álvaro Arbeloa, who played 6 full seasons alongside Cristiano Ronaldo at the Santiago Bernabeu and saw firsthand what Ronaldo was capable of at the absolute peak of his powers, said about Mbappé that what Cristiano achieved seemed extraterrestrial at the time, something impossible to match, something that no one could come close to replicating, but that Mbappé has the conditions to follow in his footsteps, and you simply never know whether he will be able to surpass him. And when a man who shared a dressing room with Ronaldo for 6 years starts making those kinds of comparisons, the football world is forced to sit up and pay very close attention. Real Madrid president Florentino Perez also publicly stated that Mbappé could win the 2026 Ballon d'Or given his extraordinary personal numbers this season. 40 goals across all competitions is a return that demands recognition at the highest individual level, though the absence of a Champions League title will complicate that conversation significantly. But the real battle, the one that has every football fan on the planet already counting down the days, is still coming, and it is coming very soon. June 2026, when the biggest World Cup in history begins across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with 48 teams competing for the greatest prize in football, a tournament on a scale the sport has never seen before, where 2 generations of football greatness could collide on the same stage. Mbappé, at 27 years old, entering what should be the absolute prime years of his career, hungry for the world title, carrying France's hopes and the weight of a generation on his shoulders, and Cristiano Ronaldo at 41 years old, still competing, still pushing, possibly playing in the final World Cup of a legendary career that has spanned over 2 decades of football excellence, and the drama of those 2 stories existing side by side in the same tournament, the rising king and the eternal legend, creates a storyline that no screenwriter could have invented. And if Mbappé dominates that tournament the way his current form suggests he is capable of doing, and if he leads France to lift the World Cup trophy on July 19 in the final, then the debate that has defined football conversations for years, the debate that fills social media timelines and late-night talk shows and arguments between friends, might finally come to an end. Cristiano Ronaldo will always remain one of the greatest to ever play this game. His records, his trophies, his dedication, his longevity are all beyond question and beyond debate. But the throne of world football, the title of the sport's defining figure of this generation, could officially and undeniably belong to Kylian Mbappé. And now the question that every football fan needs to answer is simple. Do you believe Mbappé will surpass Cristiano Ronaldo's legacy entirely? Or will Ronaldo prove one final time on the biggest stage of all why so many people still consider him the greatest player this sport has ever produced? Tell me exactly what you think in the comments below because this debate is far from over. And if you want more shocking football stories, more record-breaking moments, more major football updates delivered to you first before anyone else, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell because the next story we are covering might be even bigger than this one.